Hello and welcome to our Maturing Workforce webinar. My name is Susan Henson with Career Partners International. Our goal today is to share with you what we found in the maturing workforce arena that will help you as you navigate these waters too. So at this time I would like to turn the webinar over to Mike McKee. He is the Managing Partner of CPI Houston and the CEO of the McKee Group, with over 30 years of managing experience in the HR field. Mike?
Thank you, Susan. I want to welcome our global audience to Career Partners International's Mature Workforce webinar. Career Partners International, founded in 1986, is a global talent management company. CPI has 160 offices in 23 countries and is the fastest growing organization in the talent management industry. CPI provides services to thousands of companies in all primary industry sectors and to a variety of public and governmental organizations. In recent years, more and more of our clients have developed a heightened awareness of the impact the rapidly aging workforce is having on their organizations. A number of companies have asked CPI to help them respond to some specific needs regarding their aging population. Example of some of these client mature workforce initiatives to date include retirement and later life planning to properly prepare older workers for their future, enabling them to make positive decisions about when retirement or semi-retirement is appropriate. Helping employees that need to move on to exit constructively, and assisting employees that need or want to continue working to properly focus on their continued viability to their employer. We see more companies implementing career development programs for their mature workforce to help them take responsibility for their continued career growth, making sure they are continuing to acquire the skills they need to meet their employer's needs in these fast-changing business environments, and also increasing their motivation to move forward in response to their employer's needs. We also feel that the recession over these past 2 years have created a great deal of anxiety among older workers and its economic impact on them and their families. And they need to do a better job of planning in terms of finding focus again and moving forward in their own development. A number of our clients are beginning to focus on implementing programs that will help with their critical needs around knowledge transfer. And we're going to talk more about that in the course of our webinar and our survey results. CPI is becoming increasingly aware of these issues and the momentum that is beginning to achieve regarding the emphasis in our clients. We have made a commitment to help educate and prepare organizations to effectively prepare for the many impacts on their business brought on by the aging of the global workforce. This webinar is one of the many initiatives Career Partners International plans to provide to the business and public sectors. CPI recently conducted a global survey on the impact of the maturing workforce, and we are sharing some of the principal highlights of the survey in today's seminar. We will provide the complete survey results in detail to all of the participants on the webinar in this coming week. Next, please. Our agenda for today is to share and discuss some of the survey's principal results. We'll also be discussing some of the business implications around those results. We're fortunate to be joined by Maria Campbell, the Director of Diversity for SC Johnson Company. SC Johnson has been focusing on some of the maturing workforce impacts, and she's going to discuss some of their perspectives and solutions. We will leave time at the end of the webinar for a question and answer period, and as Susan pointed out, if you will, throughout the course of the webinar, type in your questions and submit it as we move along. And also, as you leave the webinar today, there will be some questions on your screen, and we would appreciate your answers so we can properly evaluate the success of this webinar and prepare for future opportunities to provide information to our customers and to our community. Next, please. Our panelists today are Dr. David DeLong, and I'll introduce David in more detail. Maria Campbell, as I mentioned, from SC Johnson, and we're fortunate to have Carlene McKay. She's the Career Partners International Director of Mature Workforce Initiatives. Dr. DeLong is president of DeLong and Associates, a noted researcher, consultant, and author who is a leading expert on problems and solutions caused by the changing workforce demographics and knowledge transfer. He is author of the widely praised book, Lost Knowledge, Confronting the Threats of the Aging Workforce. David is also a research fellow at the MIT Age Lab and helps AARP in judging their best employer selections. Dr. DeLong will be commenting on the survey results and provide some valuable insights on the aging workforce agenda. David, we appreciate you joining us today.
Great to be with you, Mike.
Over 1,600 respondents participated in our survey from 26 different countries, and 57% of the majority of the participants, 57%, were out of the United States, 21% from Canada, and 12% from Brazil. We had a mix of senior executives and HR professionals that participated. 35% came from the executive line ranks and 44% from the HR arena. 27% came from organizations with more than $1 billion in annual revenue, and 23% were from less. You can see our respondents by industry. Manufacturing was the leading responding sector, but we also want to point out, even in technology, transportation, and utilities that represented 2% of our sampling, that still represented a significant number of respondents out of those industry sectors.
Mike, one thing that struck me about this survey is the incredible breadth. You have, with over 1,600 respondents, you have a terrific range of executives, C-level executives, HR professionals, people from very large companies, 5,000 employees and up, more than $1 billion revenues and up, and quite a few people from small companies, under 500 employees, under $50 million. So it's a very good representation of the perception of the changing workforce market today, and as you mentioned, it's also represented probably about 20, or more than 20 countries are represented here, although the dominant ones are U.S., Canada, and Brazil. So it's a good sample.
Our first principal finding was what we're calling the predictable surprise. 64% of our respondents expect either significant or very significant impacts from their retirements and their maturing workers. Only 16% see the aging workforce as insignificant.
This is a little bit like, we call it a predictable surprise because it's a little bit like the Hurricane Katrina that hit New Orleans a number of years ago. Everybody in New Orleans knew those levees were weak. Everybody knew that if the city got hit with a Category 5 hurricane, it was going to be in deep trouble, and it still happened. And then people had to look back and say, we knew this could happen and it was coming, and we weren't taking action to prevent it or to mitigate the risks. The aging workforce is a little bit like that. It's a retirement. Some call it a retirement tsunami. It's coming this way. It may not look like it right now in some sectors and some organizations because of the recession and what's happened temporarily to the job market. In fact, this issue has been backburnered to some extent, but it's definitely here, and and people recognize that the impacts are likely to be substantial. Mike?
David, do you think that the recession that we've been experiencing has been masking this agenda?
Absolutely, absolutely. It's definitely as I say, put this issue on a back burner, but it doesn't remove it because the demographics. People are obviously, some people are working longer now and are going to work longer, and that's an issue we'll touch on a little bit in the course of the hour. But the reality is people eventually retire. One way or the other, either for health reasons or because they have enough money. So yeah, definitely it's going to affect. It's going to come to pass. Do you want me to talk here about the range of impacts on industries?
If you would, David,
Sure. One of the striking things was the incredible the range we found of responses about where it was significant and where it was insignificant, expectations about retirement impacts by industry. If you look at this chart, there's almost a 30% difference between government, utilities, energy, or government particularly, expecting significant responses or impacts from the aging workforce, down to business services at 65%, and this doesn't even show some of the sectors that are down closer to 50%. So there's a huge range, and what this highlights, this slide, really is the very patchwork problem of the aging workforce issue. As those of you on this call know, you can see it in some parts of your business. Maybe it's your executive team, maybe it's your R&D department, maybe it's your sales department, but it's not everywhere in the organization necessarily. And that's what makes it very difficult, particularly for large organizations, to implement organization or corporate-wide initiatives around this problem. Because you'll have people in certain divisions saying, what are you talking about? That's not a problem for us. So we have to recognize that this is definitely a patchwork issue, and we have to often identify where the risks are biggest and bound the problem so we can attack it to mitigate the risks for the business. Mike?
One notable comment here was the costly contradiction related to some of the results of the survey, that 2/3 see the aging workforce as a problem, but only 34% expect to do anything about it. As you pointed out, David, we seem to not be connecting the problem to the business impact.
Right, and that shows up here, Mike, when you look at the range of effects that are expected. It's received wisdom now that that knowledge loss and experience loss and to a large extent shortages of skilled workers are going to be a byproduct of retirements. I mean, I wrote about this 5 years ago in my book, Lost Knowledge, and it seems to be well understood that this is a problem. Look at the percentage, 94%. The shortage of skilled workers, by the way, does not tease out, and this shows up in the written report about the survey, the range of responses there. You have industries like manufacturing, healthcare, government, and energy, all expecting over 80% of respondents expecting skill shortages, whereas other sectors like nonprofits and transportation are down around 50%. So there's quite a range in expectations around shortage of skilled workers. What's most important about this slide, I think, is the fact that while those two are widely accepted and understood as impacts, there's much less of a sense that there are going to be effects of changes in service delivery, loss of competitiveness, and increased product costs. And those are business impacts. And the conclusion that we reached in looking at this data is that executives are not connecting the aging workforce necessarily to business impacts. And so that becomes one of the primary tasks, is helping leadership understand that if we don't attend to this issue in the short term, there are going to be serious performance impacts and frankly, cost impacts and profitability impacts on the business long term. Mike?
Well, one notable difference that came out in the survey, David, was that the difference in the way senior executives and HR managers responded to the concerns about competitiveness. There seems to be a need for more internal discussion around these issues, but obviously as this agenda gets hotter and hotter, we think there'll be more forums within organizations to discuss that. Our principal finding number 3, that organizations seem to be hit the hardest are doing the least to respond. The slide clearly shows that most sectors see a significant or very significant impact of retiring workers, yet their response to dealing with these issues is lagging behind. David, what do you see in this disparity?
This was quite a stunning finding. I have never seen this. I've been looking at these surveys now, and frankly, this is not the first aging workforce survey that's been done, as many of you on the call know. But this is the first time I've seen a clear correlation between those industries that clearly expect impacts of an aging workforce and the degree to which they're doing anything about it. And the scary thing is the correlation is sort of inverted in that those who expect the worst are doing the least about it, if you look in the right-hand column. So government expects not to make changes in their recruiting and retention practices in the next 2 years, at least the people who responded to our survey. Utilities also high, energy high, and manufacturing relatively high. And the scary thing is here, these are all industries that and sectors that we count on to deliver services and infrastructure to our economy. And yet these are obviously people and managers who are feeling probably a lack of degrees of freedom and a lack of resources to do things. And I'll try and speak to that in a few minutes about some of the things you can do, in spite of those resources being missing.
Our survey's principal finding number 4 here is that the aging workforce is truly a global phenomenon. We've seen that in our survey that the Canadians even had a heightened awareness around these issues, even more than our other 2 big global respondents, the U.S. and Brazil. David, your perspective on the global impact. I mean, are we truly facing an impact along all areas of our world?
Right. Well, this problem goes way beyond Canada, Brazil, and the U.S. But these were interesting numbers to see our Canadian friends, and I've done quite a bit of work there, clearly expressing more concern about the effects of retirements than our U.S. respondents, 78% to 62%, and significantly more worried about skill shortages. Which makes some intuitive sense, but it was a very interesting finding. But the reality is this is a global problem. Japan, Italy, Spain, and Germany all face much worse workforce demographics, aging workforce demographics than the U.S. and Canada. It's really stunning to see the numbers in those countries. And the key takeaway here is managers and executives who think they're going to solve the problem by going abroad are going to find themselves competing for that talent, high-skill talent, in ways they never anticipated, because those countries are going to be looking for it too. So this is truly a global issue, and it's even going to hit China about a decade later than the rest of us because of their one-child policy. So it's really quite amazing the degree to which this problem touches all industrialized and even developing countries.
Our principal finding number 5 here was that there is significantly more focus on recruiting than retention. Recruiting is first or the second priority for 79% of our respondents. Retention and controlling retirement was a priority for 44%. David, does this balance make sense given the changing workforce demographics?
No, but it's not surprising. I've seen this repeatedly in the other studies I've been involved with. Organizations tend to become fixated, particularly big organizations, tend to become fixated on recruiting new young talent. And the danger there is they can overlook the resources that are already in the organization, and those organizations resources that are often, frankly, moving towards retirement. And there's this collusion that goes on oftentimes between older workers, mature workers, and management that's saying, well, you know what, Joe or Sally, they're only a couple years from retirement, so we'll kind of let them coast, and hopefully they'll be out of here soon. And meanwhile, let's focus on getting those new kids on the block and getting them trained up and ready to go. But again, as those resources of young talent and mid-career talent become increasingly scarce, organizations are going to find themselves selling themselves short by not paying as much attention as they need to those more mature resources. So the question always here is one of balance, and I'll speak to that a little bit more in a few minutes.
One of the things we'd like to do today with our audience is take a couple of polls as we move through this. And our first question here is, when do you see the problem of future workforce capabilities becoming an issue? Now, 1 year from now, 3 years, over 5 years, or never? And Susan, how does this process work on our polling?
Yeah, we're going to give you about 30 seconds to complete this. I'll tell you when you have about 10 seconds left. And
we're going to analyze the results of this immediately. And our survey It was very interesting in terms of the results of the survey, and we'll be comparing your response today in our summation that we provide to all of you in next week related to the input that we received in the survey itself.
Okay, about 10 seconds.
Interesting. When do you see the problem of future workforce capabilities becoming an issue? 27% of you said now. 10% 1 year from now. 3 years out, 38%, the majority of our conclusion. And 23% over 5 years. 2% saying never. Your thoughts?
These are interesting, and they're not surprising, but what they reflect, Mike, is they do reflect, again, sort of the patchwork nature of the problem and how it varies. Some of you are in this right now, and you know it, and you're worried. You've got people who either have already retired, and you're busy backfilling, or you have people who are about to retire in the next few months or in the next year, and you're scrambling to try and do something. Those of you who are looking at this problem 3 years out or even 5 years out are in a much better position. You have more degrees of freedom to do something about it. Many more options in terms of how you begin recruiting, developing, accelerating knowledge transfer, potentially retaining people a little longer, but at least setting up, good retention properties. So the better place to be is looking out 3 to 5 years, and it's very interesting to see that about 60% of you are saying that we're in that boat. So that's a good place to be, and you're wise to be thinking about the problem now. Mike?
Hey, David. We're fortunate to have David with us. David has done a thorough analysis of our survey and the results, and also has done some review of some of his past study and come up with some really excellent information for us related to his perspectives on this. And David, if you'd spend a few minutes, we'd appreciate that.
Sure. I'm going to talk for just about 10 minutes about some of the things I've found and try to provide some ideas for action, if you will, ways to attack this problem. First of all, I assume there's 3 types of people on this call. There's some of you, many of you probably, who are indeed concerned about the aging workforce in your organization or your industry, and are worried about that, and are looking for answers and solutions and ways to proceed. There are also people on this call who are saying, "Hell, we're trying to get rid of those old folks," and I use that term intentionally. Those mature workers. We got people as I say, piling up at the door, which is a new phenomenon, particularly since the recession, where I know a number of major companies that are now extremely worried that they have a whole group of engineers, for example, who suddenly have not retired and were staying on the job longer, but the companies are very worried that these people all may decide to exit at once. So that's a second group of you out there. And the third group is some people who are actually looking for a job, older workers who may be saying, what's my next career? What are my options going to be? And I just want to honor and recognize that I know some of you are in that boat. And I did a study called "Buddy, Can You Spare a Job?" that you can get through my colleagues here at CPI, that may be of value in that regard. But I did that study last year. But regardless of what group you're in, all of you are looking at the same demographics that are on the chart right now, on the screen right now. And this chart shows that in the decade between 2004 and 2014, the workforce in the U.S., and this translates to Canada too, only the numbers are even sharper, the age group 55 to 64 has grown over 40%. And look at the groups behind them, at 45 to 54, and the mid-career group 35 to 44. That group has shrunk almost 8%. That's why when you go looking for mid-career talent or the next generation of that project manager, product manager, or systems analyst, or actuary, or whatever the specialized field is, they're not there. And that's why we hear so much talk today about the tremendous shortage in the leadership pipeline. It's just because of these graphics right here. So it's really important that we start to think more creatively about sourcing talent. And one thing you want to ask yourself is, how is our organization approaching this problem right now? And I find, I've just finished a new book called The Executive Guide to High Impact Talent Management, which involved interviews with over 70 senior executives and talent experts. And one of the things we found, and one of the case studies I did, was a large consumer products company, about a CEO a new CEO who came into this. There's a global company, and this is an organization, again, like many of yours, that has some relatively mature talent management programs. You know, we've got succession planning, we've got training, we've got leadership development, we have a mentoring program, we've got an onboarding program. We're cool. Well, you know what? And this CEO had aggressive growth plans for the company, but he decided to look under the covers of the leadership development program and get some hard numbers on what their real leadership pipeline was, and he was stunned to find that it wasn't working. So the point here is not to be overconfident and to recognize that even organizations that have relatively mature projects, talent management programs, can be actually headed for trouble unless they're really continually skeptical and watching how those things are performing. Then there's plenty of executives who are alarmed, who really know this is a problem, and they're looking for ideas about what to do about it. And those are the kinds of organizations we end up working with a lot today. And then finally, there are organizations, particularly coming out of the recession. I had a hospital CEO tell me not long ago, he said, you know, workforce issues, this aging workforce issue has really fallen off my plate. Because frankly, retention is not a big deal right now because of the recession. We got people who want to keep their jobs. Nobody's leaving. In fact, that might be our problem. So the problem, again, for people like this is, and organizations like this, is if we go into denial about this problem, we're not going to just recognize it until it's too late. Now, one thing we have to do is really look at to get our arms around this problem, is to break it down and to look at the specific risks that we're facing in terms of our workforce. And there are 5 of them here that we've identified as part of the research for our new book. The first is sort of recognizing increasing skill shortages of skilled talent in critical areas. You know, more than 40%, about 40% of the respondents in this survey said they had no way of identifying the skills at risk in their business. Now, 60% are doing this or are starting to do this, but still, it's a huge number of organizations that are not yet paying attention to the skill shortages in their business. The leadership pipeline, I mentioned that is universally thin in organizations, and so the challenge today becomes, how do we accelerate development of our future leaders and retain them? And we worked with one insurance company where the CEO came into the organization. He realized he's got 50% of his top 300 executives are within 2 or 3 years of retiring. This is a major international insurance company that's looking at a massive exodus of executives retiring. So the CEO has to really accelerate and pay intense attention to the leadership pipeline. Older workers staying longer, I mentioned that. That's a new dynamic, and that raises the issue of performance management. I think performance management is going to become an increasingly salient issue in organizations because we cannot afford deadwood in our organizations at any level, at any age. And yet, my research shows that organizations continue to put up with that in a surprising way. It's quite amazing, but the need to pay attention to performance management at all levels is going to be really important. And then this issue of leveraging knowledge or accelerating knowledge transfer across 4 generations in the workplace. How do we make sure that these generations are collaborating together? I find the organizations that are really going to be competitively successful in the future are those that find a way to accelerate and improve collaboration between generations and not conflict, which is what we hear all the time in our interviews and in our conversations. That's another thing that we work on, building that collaboration, ways of doing that. And finally, the other risk is really, again, retirements increasing the need for improved knowledge retention, and this speaks specifically to the issue that we saw earlier on. Now, all of these conversations about the changing workforce have to start on the right-hand side of this slide with the notion of performance goals. And I've argued for some years now that if you look to the left on the left side of the slide, all those workforce changes, retirements, mid-career turnover, and skill shortages, lead to potential knowledge loss. And let me be super clear that not everybody who leaves the organization represents significant knowledge loss. In fact, there's plenty of people that we actually want to retire or are ready to retire, and that's fine. But what I'm always harping on is identifying the individuals and the groups where critical knowledge, critical to the strategy and the operations of the business, are at risk. And this knowledge loss can directly impact the business in at least 4 ways. It can reduce our capacity for innovation. You know, if you're an R&D executive, you're trying to bring new products to market, it can slow that process down because you need to reinvent processes. You forget what you've done before. You degrade your skill base. It can definitely decrease your capacity for growth. The reality is we don't grow complex, knowledge-intensive business operations or public sector operations without highly skilled people. I interviewed an executive in a global chemical company a couple of years ago who said our long-term strategy is to grow our plants in Southeast Asia. The problem is we're losing our senior chemical engineers faster than we can train them up. And you can't open complex new chemical plants in a foreign country without skilled people, skilled talent. So that capacity for growth is definitely potentially limited. The less efficiency and increased costs. If you're in a low-cost business, efficiency-driven business, the loss of your skilled operational people can increase the time it takes to diagnose problems and repair those problems. I've seen that specifically on manufacturing lines. I've seen repeated stories of manufacturing sites losing key personnel, and suddenly the production line goes down and can't be repaired anywhere near as quickly, and the company's losing money by the hour because of these losses. And finally, the increased risk of errors and accidents. All those are up for grabs when we lose knowledge. Now, Albert Einstein said the problems that exist in the world today can't be solved by the level of thinking that created them. In other words, we have to get more innovative in our talent management solutions. Frankly, what I've seen in HR in the last 5 years of my research for this new book, it's not heartening. There's a lot of stuff that's way too traditional and not creative enough. We need to be inventing new ways of thinking about these problems going forward. We also need to be thinking about what the real issue is here. The issue is not the aging workforce or older workers or younger workers. The issue is future workforce capabilities. That's what we're trying to, that's the sort of the target, if you will. And that's what leadership cares about, future workforce and leadership capabilities. And that's why we have to think in a coordinated, integrated way about how we're using retirement, our aging workforce, how we're leveraging those folks, how we're retaining and developing our mid-career employees. And that opens up a whole nother conversation, which we're not even going to have today, about leveraging mid-careers and developing them, and then how we're recruiting and onboarding new young talent. The challenge is to integrate these 3 pieces and not over-focus on any one or the other. So that's the key takeaway there, is leveraging, is balancing those. Now, this chart's got a lot of stuff on it. Start in the lower left-hand corner and think in terms of your organization's current capabilities. When you're planning for the future, the tendency is to start from the lower left and go to the right, and to think about how planning forward. I'm urging you, one takeaway today is to stop thinking that way and to really look at on the upper right-hand corner at what the performance you're envisioning in the future. What is it that your leadership is committed to in the future? I worked with a chief nuclear officer in a Midwest nuclear plant a few years ago who was very good at this. He realized that in his organization, in order to sustain the level of performance and safety that plant needed, that reactor needed, he could look back and say, what are the capabilities we're going to need in 3 to 5 years, which is the box in the upper left, And in other words, plan backwards and say, if we're going to ever deliver the performance that we're saying we're going to deliver, what are the capabilities we're going to need in 3 to 5 years? Then you can do this gap analysis and figure out where we are today, given the retirements we expect, and start to plan for how you're going to get to that future capability level. The key here is this creates a sense of urgency and focus for management, which is so easy to lose in the day-to-day, bustle of all the other emergencies and firefights that we get caught up in. If we can get people focused on those, on the future performance levels, and keep them reminding them that that's the real goal, then we can more likely to sustain commitment to the efforts that we're going to need to build our future capabilities. Now, in the last 2 slides, what I'd like to share with you is to get to the future, we must break the aging workforce problem down into something actionable. You need to keep asking the question when people come to you and you say, we got an aging workforce problem, we've got this problem with older workers, we've got whatever it is, the changing workforce demographics, say, what do you mean by that? What would it look like if we were leveraging our mature workers more effectively? What would that actually look like? Well, here are 5 areas where you need to be thinking in terms of solutions. One is retaining older workers. That's one area where you might, I'll take them off and come back. Retaining older workers, improving performance of your mature workers as well as your younger workers, so performance improvement at all levels. Developing targeted knowledge transfer programs to help move knowledge across generations, rehiring retirees potentially, and even recruiting baby boomers or older job candidates. Those are 5 specific areas you could be thinking about and looking at. And first of all, retaining older workers. First Horizon Bank in Tennessee has had a program called Prime Time, which they use to help retain their highly skilled, hard-to-replace not just older workers, but key workers, and a lot of them are mature workers. But one of the key things about this program, and it's something to remember, is you need to think of these solutions as a program, not a policy. One of the things I find in organizations that are particularly effective at leveraging their older workforce is they recognize this is not a universal program that we apply to everybody. We're not offering full lifetime employment to everybody. We have a program here that if this particular individual employee qualifies, they are going to potentially benefit from it. But this is really an important distinction. It's not something that's universally applied. So the second is improving mature worker performance. Pitt County Memorial Hospital in North Carolina is very wisely developed this program to reignite the passion of their mature nurses. And it's a fascinating 3-day off-site program that they have nurses really rethinking what their career could be within the hospital system. And a point here is these nurses often don't stay in that organization, in their immediate job. They may move on, but it gives them new energy and new ideas about what they could do within the organization. And the feedback has been unbelievable. And out of 144 nurses who've been through this program in 6 years, they've had like 2 or 3 that have left. These are all older nurses. It's just a stunning retention rate. Developing targeted knowledge transfer is another key area, and the key point there is recognizing where you're identifying the specific risks, specific people who are at risk, clarifying what knowledge needs to be transferred, and then giving those people who have the knowledge the tools they need to transfer it. We've done work recently in a major electric utility that is looking at losing more than half of its engineers in the next couple of years. And it was in a panic situation around this, and it had to do with being able to keep its license and stay open. But by clearly identifying which knowledge domains were most critical and most at risk, they could develop a program that went after what was most serious to transfer. Rehiring retirees, this is a very controversial area because some organizations just will keep their hands off it and they won't do it. But the reality is most organizations now, at least at an informal level, are bringing retirees back continually in specialized roles on a contract basis. The Aerospace Corporation in California is an organization that has done this very effectively over the years. And there's organizations like yourencore.com, which are particularly successful at helping organizations rehire engineers and scientists who are retired back into their organization. They become a third-party organizer. And then finally, recruiting baby boomers. This is a whole other area, and the Vermont Country Store is a good example of they're a large online retail business, and what they've realized is by loaning out their computer center to a local job training program for those 55 and over, they get first shot at people who might be good CSRs, customer service reps, and hiring them. So we're looking for more creative ways to tap into an older workforce, older market is also key. Let me leave you with these thoughts then around the aging workforce and some ideas for action. When it comes to managing a changing workforce, hope is not a method. You need a plan, you need a framework in which you can develop solutions. You want to, first of all, break the problem down into something manageable in terms of those 5 sort of areas that I was showing you. It's like the electric utility, identifying the engineers who are retiring and where they need to put their time and attention. We need to collect stories about the costs of failing to do this or where we missed the boat in doing it, and what missed opportunities there will be if we don't attend to this problem. We must connect our leaders and our organizations emotionally with why this issue is really important. This is not just something we do with numbers, strategic workforce analysis, coming up with numbers that frankly start to numb the minds of senior leaders. We need stories and anecdotes to illustrate why this is so critical to the business. Find the bright spots. Look for those places where, what does good look like? What does it look like when knowledge transfer works, or when we bring retirees back effectively? Clarify specific action steps. Give people the tools they need to teach. One of the big mistakes we make in the area of mentoring, for example, is giving them too much time, is not having the tools they need. We assume people who are experts in some field know how to teach. And that's just not true. We have to teach them how to be mentors and to teach others. And finally, link these potential investments to outcomes. Keep asking, what is the impact on the business? These are just some ideas of how to get started and a variety of ways to work with clients. Thanks very much. We've got one more poll coming up here, I think, and it's what is the Susan, are you there?
Yes, I am.
You want to introduce this poll, or shall I?
Okay, sure. This is, what is your organization's approach to maturing workforce issues? And your choices are confident it is under control, alarmed but unsure what to do, in denial, so doing nothing, and continually looking for solutions. And again, we'll give you about 30 seconds.
And then we'll have David comment on these results after we see them. And again, we will compare this information to the responses that we had on a similar question in the survey. I had that input to you in our summary that we'll be providing to all of you.
Okay, about 10 more seconds left.
All right, we've got 77% on confident it is under control, 13% alarmed but unsure what to do, 53% in denial, so doing nothing, and 57% continually looking for solutions.
So we've got 23% of the group is honest. I mean, those of you in denial at least sort of recognize it, and I find that's a fairly widespread feeling, and also obviously those who are continually looking for solutions. I think the market in this area and the desire to find ways to take action is definitely heating up. So
the big one here is that 93% don't feel that that they're confident and that this is under control.
Right.
What I'd like to do now is I'd like to introduce Maria Campbell. Maria is the Director of Diversity for S.C. Johnson Company. S.C. Johnson is a well-respected 124-year-old company with more than $8 billion in sales and employs 12,000 people worldwide. S.C. Johnson sells their products in virtually every corner of the world. Maria joined SC Johnson 20 years ago and has served in engineering, marketing, and human resources. She developed a 7-tier strategic plan regarding diversity that is utilized by all business units and levels in SC Johnson. Maria, your input related to the maturing workforce and SC Johnson's approach.
Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you so much for joining us. On behalf of SC Johnson, we're happy to share on a topic that really means a lot to us. Just a little background, though, on who we are. We celebrate today 124 years. Today is not our birthday, but this year. We continue to be family-owned and managed, and we have about 3,200 employees in the U.S., but 12,000 globally, $8 billion in sales, and happy to make brands around the world. We hope and are very hopeful that you have some of our brands in your cupboards, in your cabinets. We're excited about what we do in terms of delivering solid brands and products to consumers. We continue to believe that we just don't make products for consumers, but we also care about the consumers we make products for. Next slide. Just a little bit about who we are as leaders. Our vision and mission and purpose is really grounded in 6 core leadership values. Next slide. These values, next slide, please. Hello. Thank you. These values really talk about us as a family-owned company, an innovator, an enduring global brand, a superior partner with some of our key customers and around the world. Our really commitment on leaving the world a better place than when we first entered it, and being a leading company around the world. Next slide, please. But it was clearly our value statement that is documented in the booklet called This We Believe, and it was said in 1927. And it fairly simply says, the goodwill of the people is the only enduring thing in any business. It is the sole substance, the rest is shadow. Now, we can sit here all day and debate on why in 1927 did he have the foresight and the vision to make such a profound statement that is very inclusive and recognizes the goodwill of all people, because clearly in 1927 some of us could have been left out, but he knew very clearly what was on the horizon as it relates to this great company. Next slide. So what I would like to do today is really share with you our take, our insight on this mature workforce. If you look at our 3,200 population within the U.S., it is clear to us that 39%, nearly 39% of our employees are seasoned workers, 50 and over. So it makes sense for us to have a diehard commitment to this whole mature workforce phenomenon and what we need to do to not only support it as it approaches retirement, but also continue to support it through retirement. It is very key for us. When you look at some key mature workforce programs that we feel has had the biggest impact, it is clear that, number one, we have a very rich menu of work-life programs, probably over 40, that service a number of employee needs at SC Johnson. Things that really are targeted on the mature workforce that I know that they use is this whole sick and elder care services that we have available. You can also get meals to go at the site if you don't feel like going home and cooking, and you can take them home and serve dinner to your loved ones. We have a very large health and wellness program because we have a facility with a swimming pool and exercise area because we're really committed to preventive care. And also, we also have an opportunity to get together with our employees on 20, 30, and 40-year clubs. But the main thing we initiated, I would say, in 2007 was employee support groups. And there were 4. One was the parents of children with special needs. One was for elder caregivers. One was for early careers. And then the other one was for mature workers. And what was interesting is when we formed this group in 2007, we had only 9 members at that time. Now we have 200 employees that are actively participating in the Mature Workforce Network. Their mission or vision is really to share knowledge and explore issues relevant to work life and pre-retirement. We want to make sure that those that are in retirement make it easier, and we provide the information to help them as they go through retirement. Some key initiatives that this group has really focused on is providing a retirement checklist, kind of some discussions on transition to retirement, and then some key discussions from external speakers on Social Security, financial planning, Medicare. And then I spoke to you a little bit about the 20, 30, and 40-year club. This gives our retirees an opportunity to meet those seasoned workers that may be approaching retirement. Because sometimes your family, your business family, it's hard to leave that business family. So we want to make sure that we have a network, a rich network of those that have retired and maybe those that are thinking about retirement, but they come together in that whole club setting. If we really look at advice that I would share, and it's really just 2 or 3 points. Number one, this whole thing of knowledge transfer started now. A lot of our manufacturing operations, when we bring in younger workers, which would be more so on the back shift, and your more seasoned workers are on the first shift, we encourage a peer or buddy relationship on the line. So they are training and learning from each other on that line. We also transfer our employees through different lines, so they have an opportunity to network and to learn. So there's active and, if you could say, real-time learning that is happening on the line. I would also suggest that you get involved, the mature workers, in helping you find the solutions so they can then own it. We did ask for help as we asked their input on designing a peer or buddy mentorship program that helped train new workers. And we got a strong buy-in from those on the line to really help, because I think they all realized that someone back in the day helped them. So it made sense for us to want to involve our mature workers in that effort. And then I think as much as possible, you may want to think about forming different support groups that, I think Mike said it best, helps mature workers prepare for and get through retirement, because it can be a very interesting process, and for some it can be a very nerving process. So as much as you can suggest or encourage employee support groups, I think that would also benefit and help you greatly. That's all I have for now, but I do appreciate the opportunity to share.
Maria, thank you for joining us, and we very much appreciate the time that you've provided to us. I now would like to introduce Carlene McKay. Carlene is Career Partners International's Director of Mature Workforce Initiatives. Carlene is a nationally recognized leader and expert regarding the emerging workforce. Carlene has authored Boomer Bust, Return of the Boomers. She is one of the most knowledgeable people globally regarding the baby boom generation. Carlene has enjoyed a long and distinguished career in the talent management industry. She's widely sought out as a speaker and travels extensively and interpreting the message and future of the workforce demographics in our changing society. She is a workforce policy advisor for AARP and has provided essential guidance to Career Partners International in developing their mature workforce practice. We're fortunate to have her as a part of our team. And Carlene, we look forward to your remarks.
Thank you, Mike. And let's look at this slide that we've just put up as you listen to me. My contribution today is to take the information gleaned from the survey, add David DeLong's research and Maria Campbell's insight, wrap it all up, and offer you 10 action steps that you can turn into ideas and use immediately. So let's look at these in order. And thank you, first of all, to Dave DeLong, who's such an exceptional reputation as an advisor to firms. Special thanks to Maria Campbell, which brings me to my first recommendation. Maria Campbell, of course, represents the best employer of AARPs, and she has extraordinary value for all of us because she's both lived and initiated mature workforce changes that others are simply contemplating today. This short introduction brings me to item 1, which is reach out to the other AARP best employers. There are 50 in total. If you Google their website under Best Employers AARP, you can connect with experts, many of whom will be in your own hometown, to help you to figure out what they're doing and what's working best for them. If we look at the second item, when I was looking at the survey, I noticed that most people are aware of the impact of aging on their organizations, but many have not completed the task of studying the changing demographic implications. So here's the action item. One is that you can contact us for a list of comprehensive questions you may find both important and useful. Or two, you may wish to reach out to AARP again. They have an online demographic assessment. There's a slight difference between both assessments. You might want both. As for the third action step, well, most of you are very aware of the aging population. Most are still trying to recruit from the youngest groups that are much too small, and not only much too small in terms of meeting all our recruiting opportunities, but also many are not well qualified or ready to take the boomers' place. In fact, there are 5 million jobs in the U.S. today that are available and waiting for qualified workers. So the action here, of course, is to look at new places, especially to source the mature workers themselves. There's many, many of these places, and of course, we'll be happy to help you find them. If we look at items 4 and 5, they tie in together. And as a practical matter, I'd suggest that you really pay attention to what's going on in other governments. They're all struggling with longer lifetimes and shorter lifetime focused retirement benefits. Just this week, for example, Britain announced a severe curtailing of welfare benefits. In other words, they are retreating from their cradle-to-grave so-called entitlements. What happens in Britain, it's kind of like doesn't stay in Britain. It's not the Vegas comparison. It actually ends up looking like what's going to happen to us, or possibly could, wherever you may sit. On 5, that really answers the question in another way in terms of learning from other people. Please look at the MEP Life Study. It just came out this past week, and it's really worth looking at regardless of where you sit, which country you're working from. If you look at our next item, action item, that I think is really critical, because in reviewing the survey, we saw that there were many of you who had organizations leaders who were not as aware as you are, perhaps, of the critical need to identify and develop key mature talent. So an action is educate your leadership. If they are to support your efforts to achieve sustainability through retention, retiree programs, and increasing reliance upon a flexible workforce of specialized mature workers, they have to understand it. Speaking of educating leadership and looking at item number 7, I really think it's just as important to educate your hiring teams. Hiring teams are often quite young and have certain preconceived notice ideas about mature workers. So help them to debunk the many myths about the mature workforce. And by the way, we have some short webcasts, 20, 30 minutes, that can help your hiring teams to overcome some of those myths and to learn about the many advantages of the mature workforce. We're already on number 8, and we know that your role and ours is to show people the way to remain competitive. Of course, their role is to do the work, right? So if you look at number 8, find new ways to educate your workforce. For example, career development programs are emerging all over the country that I work with and talk with people across the globe, and how interested they are in aligning career development programs with individual development and organizational need. And as a result, are beginning to improve performance and profitability. So career development programs internally are quite important. Item 9, of course, is leverage your educational assistance benefits. It's one of the most underutilized benefits that companies and organizations have. Your commitment to leveraging educational assistance on the recruiting end of time is a very big selling point. People are looking to be taken care of in the sense of a commitment to their personal as well as your organizational development. And of course, the 10th one is about us. We hope that you will reach out to CPI whenever you need a partner to help with any of the first 9 steps and more. For a copy of this advice expanded, please see your local partner, and we'll be happy to send you more information on these action steps. Thank you.
Carlene, let me ask you a question, if I may. On the MetLife study, how does our audience acquire that study?
Just Google it on the internet, and it's so recent that you'll see the recent one, September of this year.
Great, Carlene. We certainly appreciate your input. And now what we'd like to do in our remaining time is take some of the questions from our audience, and Susan will guide us through that process. Thank you very much. And Susan?
Excellent. We've had quite a few, and those that we don't get to, we will put in an email and send out to everyone that has attended the webinar today. So, Mike, first question is, can mature workers really learn all the new technology that most organizations required? Sort of the old dog, new tricks question.
David, would you respond to that, please?
I can, but you know what? Maria, you on?
I'm here.
Maria?
Yes.
Are you here? I'd be interested in your take on that first. Just as a practitioner, sort of your own experience at SC Johnson with technology and
Sure.
workers.
You know, we have an on-site kind of a college here where people can come that are on the line, of course, and take updated classes. But I think we have not experienced any challenges there. I think what we find is they're eager to share and eager to learn new things because they probably have been telling management that all along. And for whatever reason, sometimes we listen and sometimes we don't. But when it comes to an opportunity to make a difference and make change happen, they're eager to want to, give some suggestions on what to do differently. Now, of course, you have those that, say, we've been doing it for 50 years and this is how it is. But we have found that we have more that are saying the opposite.
Right. I found in my research the need to master new technologies. First of all, these things are always a landscape. Take 1,000, 100 people, who might be over 50, and you're going to have 25 of them who are going to be, I'll use the word Luddites, who have no interest in mastering more than what they know now. And you're going to have 25 people who are on the leading edge, who have been tweeting for years, or got the latest new technology and can't wait to get something else, and who can be teaching young people. And then you've got a ton of people in the middle. So it's always a range. But the one big insight from my recent research on this is for older workers or older job candidates, mastering the technology is probably the key thing. Staying up to date on it and staying fluent in it is the key thing to staying vital and valuable in the organization or on the job market. And you know what? This is true now for a 35-year-old or even a 30-year-old. Someone who's, once you go into an organization and you're using their technology, you by definition stop necessarily using stuff that's outside the organization. So the potential for any employee or any worker at any age to become somewhat obsolete in the job market is greater. But it's a bigger pressure on older workers for sure, because they need to learn things that are that they're not as used to. So,
Susan, the next question, please.
Yes, and I think we have Carlene on the line.
Excellent.
Carlene, do we have you?
Okay, I thought I heard her breaking in. Okay, the next question is actually to Dave. You mentioned that all mentoring efforts do not produce desired results. Do you have any advice for us relative to effective mentoring programs?
Sure. I'm a little partial on this because my co-author and colleague is one of the leading experts in mentoring in the country, and we're going to be collaborating with CPI in some of this work going forward. The key thing here is making sure that, first of all, there's broadly two types of mentoring, and there's actually many, but there's the career, let's mentor younger people and help them think about where their career should go, and then there's the other end of the spectrum is how can I teach you to do a job next week? It's sort of in the trenches mentoring, those who know teaching those who need to know. And for this latter group, we have to make sure that those mature workers have the tools they need to be effective mentors, because we're all already stretched way too thin on the job. So to ask these people to actually train a younger person or a junior person, less experienced person, and pass on their skills or knowledge, with what time, with what tools, and there are all kinds of ways now that we can actually accelerate that process and make it much more effective, instead of just throwing people in the trenches and being very just general about mentor this person, please, and without giving them the direction and the coaching that they need to do that effectively.
Next question, Susan.
Okay, excellent. Next question is, please address how C-suite folks like me are very nervous based upon advice from our attorneys on implementing initiatives like these being presented given the ageism litigation world we live in.
My response to that is, and Maria, I'd be interested in your opinion on this, is I think sometimes C-suite executives, and this is fairly provocative, I think they listen too much to their lawyers. And I'll tell you why I think that. Because there are plenty of organizations out there today who are doing this. The Aerospace Corporation has people retiring on Friday and coming back in on Monday as contractors, and collecting retirement. Now, why are they able to do this publicly and your organization is not? And I'll tell you frankly, this is a very controversial thing, and there's a lot of confusion among tax lawyers and attorneys and HR folks around what their options are. But there's plenty of organizations, and a growing number of them, that are doing things that are very progressive in this area that other organizations will say, oh no, we can never do that. Mm-hmm. And my question is, well, why can other people do it and you can't? So I just ask you to push sometimes beyond sort of what one piece of advice you may be getting, and probe a little bit and understand why other organizations are able to explore these options.
And this is Maria Campbell. I guess I'm hearing 2 points. One is this whole issue around maybe hiring back retirees once they've left corporate America. And I think there is a certain amount of time that they cannot work if it impacts their retirement benefits and Social Security, et cetera. So that's one topic that I really cannot address, because I think you have to be within a certain timing because of any regs, et cetera. But the other point is readying or preparing those that are in your organization now for something that is inevitably going to happen, and getting them involved in the solution versus self-imposing what you think should happen. And I think the more you get the mature workers involved in the process, like I said, we went from 9 to 200 employees within 1 year that were part of this mature work support group. They know what's happening, and they want to make sure that they're prepared. So I think the more you get the mature worker involved in the process, the less concern that you'll have for any type of opportunities, legal opportunities in the future.
We have time for one more question, Susan.
Okay, and this question is, with the pace of change, how significant is the knowledge loss if the relevancy of that knowledge will be dated anyway? Can David comment on this?
Sure. Want to be very clear. There's actually plenty of knowledge you want to lose in your organization to make room for the innovative ideas that you need to grow your business. So this is not at all about saying we need to retain all knowledge. Nothing close to that. It's a matter of identifying what knowledge is critical to future performance of the organization. What knowledge, if we lose, will cost the organization. British Petroleum, before the terrible disaster in the Gulf of Mexico, retired out their chief corrosion engineer from the company a few years ago, and within a year and a half they had major pipeline leaks on the north slope of Alaska, shut down 8% of the U.S. Refining capability because they had lost the knowledge about the critical strategic knowledge about managing corrosion in their pipelines. They ended up in front of Congress for that. There's a specific example of knowledge that they had to find a better way to retain, or it was going to come back to hurt them. So definitely you have to parse out what knowledge needs to be saved and what knowledge doesn't. and it varies by industry.
One of the things that we will do, and we promise this to our audience today, is we'll take all of the questions that you've submitted. We're going to work those through our panelists and prepare answers, and we will provide those answers back to our audience through our summation, along with the Mature Workforce survey results. Just in closing, I'd just like to say that we all have a challenge ahead of us in responding to these obvious changes that are being created by the aging of our workforce. I can tell you that Career Partners International is firmly committed to helping our clients achieve solutions that will help their organizations compete successfully in the global marketplace. But also, just as importantly, is that we want to help enhance the success and fulfillment of their employees. And I'll leave you with a Jack Welch quote that I've always found to be very profound in these changing times. But Jack Welch, the former CEO of General Electric, one of his great quotes was, "When the rate of change outside exceeds the rate of change inside, the end is in sight." We thank you for joining us on this webinar. We look forward to providing future opportunities for learning around the Mature Workforce Initiative, and we wish everyone a very good day. Thank you very much.